Welcome back to Real Estate with Mariah and Spenc. Today we are going to talk about the closing process. We're going to share basically what you need to know going into this, what to expect on closing day. I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions, common misconceptions, or things that, I don't know, home buyers think or just aren't sure about.
We
or
just don't know any better as well. I mean,
Yes.
especially if you're a first-time home buyer, you only know unless you're told, right? What's beautiful about us and the way we structure our business currently is I actually hire out a transaction coordinator for every transaction, whether you are a buyer or a seller. And her number one job is to literally tell you on paper, she puts it to paper, about the full process from beginning to end. And this includes that closing period. So the things to expect, I mean, it makes it so much more easier and convenient. That's just a tool that we provide for all of our clients. So when you do come work with us, this process is very, very black and white, but ultimately we need to discuss to you, rather than my transaction coordinator, what to expect after closing.
First, to start off, what are some common misconceptions that people have about closing
When
day?
you sign your documents, that is when the keys are given to you and you get to go straight from the closing office to the home.
Yes.
I think that's like one of the biggest things I always hear is, when do I get access? When do I get access?
Or that, just like you said, buyers expect to get the keys at closing. It might be different in other states, but in Oregon, at least, we legally cannot give the keys to the buyers at the closing table. And the reason is because there is a difference between signing and closing. Signing is that appointment we make to go into the title company and sign the papers to officially close. And closing is what happens usually about 24 hours or so after we sign, which basically just means we're officially recorded. Your name is now on the title.
Here's the deal.
Yes.
In order to fund a home, you have to have signatures on the paper, right? So that is why you come in usually a day before the official closing date. In the offer, there's a section that says closing date and preferred closing date. So that is what the title company, us, your lender, that is the deadline. That is the time frame as to when everything has to be performed and dealt with. So usually I strongly encourage the week of closing. If title's ready, if lending's ready, all documentation sitting, just ready for you to sign. You schedule a time, what's convenient for you. If you work, you wait until after hours or going before work. Get the signatures dealt with. Just because you have signatures dealt with does not mean funding happens, keys are transferred, or you even have access to this house.
Right.
That is one of, I think, the biggest misconceptions, and even sellers get this mistakenly interpreted sometimes because they're, you are at the finish line. It feels great. You're at the title office. Everybody's, you even bring in money for a down payment at times to go to title and as part of your down payment. And you just think the home's yours afterwards. The reality is the home is yours, usually on contract at 5 p.m., the date the home funds. So forget the closing date on the offer. It's the date the home funds at 5 p.m. if that's how the offer is written. If that date seems to go by, we have an obligation to make. We have to write up an addendum even for this thing to even record correctly with the state. And that's generally how it happens for you to get keys and access. Now, Mariah, let's talk about how keys can actually be transferred to the new owner.
So generally what we're going to do is we will set up an appointment with the buyer and meet them there if we are the ones representing you, and we will meet you there with those keys and give you the keys in that way.
Yeah.
Another thing though, talking about, closing versus funding or closing versus signing, is that say you're going in on a Friday and you're signing papers at 1:00 p.m., for example, be aware that we're probably not going to be officially funded until the next business day, which would be 5 p.m. Monday, because the title company is closed over the weekend. So in that case, we really, really push to have signings scheduled to be like first thing in the morning, right when the title company opens. I don't know, 8 or 9 a.m. Is when we try to get them scheduled to be, so that they have time to process it. And hopefully, if it all goes well, we can be closed by the end of the day Friday. But the only way to usually close by the end of the day is to sign first thing in the morning, or it'll probably close the next business day.
Yeah.
And another misconception going along with this is I hear from clients all the time, they want to schedule their signing way far in advance, or even honestly not way far in advance, a time that sounds normal to schedule the showing. And what I mean by this is, say we're a week out and my clients are wanting to schedule signing, as I completely understand. It makes sense when you're moving, especially if you're moving across states, you want to just have it planned. You're taking time off work to be there. However, usually signing is actually scheduled kind of last minute.
It's always last minute.
It's not something we can schedule even a week ahead of time.
Well, if all the documentation and paperwork's into title, then of course. And the title agent's going to reach out to you. And usually the week of closing is when I start off and I call title directly. It's part of my tasks that I perform and say, hey, when can our client get scheduled to sign? Do you have any documentation needed? Do you have all the documentation? That is what a real estate agent should probably be doing for you, just to make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's dotted. But signing, it does always feel rushed. I do want to clarify that, because some people, they don't understand, because there's different people that want things on calendar. There's some people that can't do things last minute. Maybe their jobs just aren't allowed to up and run and go to a signing table. What's something I think we should really hit on, though, is what do you do if you're an out-of-state client, you're purchasing, say, here in Oregon, but you live in Montana? Do you have to be here in Oregon in order for that home to get signed and funded?
You do not. We have worked with clients who were all the way across the globe in other countries, and they did not have to come to Oregon at all to sign. So no matter where you're at, we just need to know ahead of time that you're not going to be present at signing. So we do need to know because beforehand, of course, because the title company is going to need to arrange this, but it is something that it can be done. And this brings up a question. So I was asked once, can we just DocuSign it? No, that could be very illegal, and I could see that's definitely not legal for good reason. That could really go
when it's
sideways.
An out-of-state situation. Generally, they're going to send a notary, whether it's to your door at another title office. Say we're working at Ticor Title here in Oregon. If there's a Ticor Title in your town in a different state, it's going to make it beautiful, easy, convenient. You're just going to walk into that Ticor Title. They're going to have your docs and you sign normally. Yeah. But if not, they're going to send you a notary, usually to your front door, and you'll be able to have all those documentations signed during that time.
All right. So some common mistakes to avoid at closing, things not to do during closing.
Okay.
Do not change your marital status. Do not change jobs. Do not switch banks. Do not pay off existing accounts unless your lender tells you to. Do not make large purchases.
Man, I had nothing wrong with this. The deal still came through and happened and was performed on. But there was this like black and white era of like the unknown, because one of my clients were in the middle of transaction, and we're literally probably 5 days out from closing. I'd say 10 maybe. And it comes to be told to us, the lender and myself, that my client had decided to take out a big loan, and it was about $30,000. Yes, he did have a cosigner on this home purchase. Luckily, he had those cosigners. If he did not have a cosigner, this deal would be dead in the water as it sat. Me and the lender just could not believe ourselves. We're just like, you couldn't wait 10 more days until after this home closes. Yeah. These things do happen. There's a reason we have preferred lenders. We work through it. We problem solve. We get the job done for you at the end of the day. But make other people's lives easier. And I always say, if you're unsure, ask. Ask before you do a big purchase. Ask before you check out a credit card. Ask before you pay off a big loan, because sometimes people just think less debt is good debt, or less debt is good.
Right. And they just pay everything off.
Not a lot of times that works.
And then it affects your loan. Yeah. So don't do anything.
Because they're looking over your bank statements. Yes. Lenders, they need 3 months worth of bank statements, and they're tracking your purchases. They're tracking your withdrawals, because they need to know that you're going to be able to pay the bank back. I mean, we're taking $300,000 loans out here. You need to be able to afford your mortgage. This is a big deal at the end of the day. So work smart, not hard.
Yes. Okay, so what to expect on closing day. The buyer pays all remaining closing costs as listed in the closing disclosure. The seller transfers ownership by signing over the paper to the title company. Wow,
I've been like stuttering too today.
Okay, so that's what happens though. The buyer pays the remaining funds, and the seller signs to transfer over the title. Simple as that.
So all monies is dealt with. In my eyes, I just have this big visual of balloons going up in the air. I'm sending out a congratulation text, and we get you keys usually that next day if we're not signed. I recommend if you have a signing happening on a Friday, for instance, we have Saturday and Sunday, non-business days, get your signing scheduled at the beginning of the day. Usually if you're in the morning, the home can be funded usually by 1, 2 p.m. You can get keys that same day. It's called a same-day funding, and there's nothing wrong with that. If not, try and get signing dealt with previously earlier in the week. It's only going to make your life better. It's going to make the moving a lot better because a lot of us, let's get real, hire movers to transfer from home to home.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of coordinating to be done in a home sale and a home purchase.
Yeah. How to prepare: bring a photo ID, a cashier's check, and a proof of insurance.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
That is awesome.
All right. Now, lastly, do people move on closing day? I feel like we kind of covered this.
That was kind of, I jumped
that was
ahead,
a
I
top
guess.
question, but we kind of already covered that. So it could happen.
Yes and no.
It could happen, but usually no. And then, of course, there are situations where the exact time and day that the buyer gets the rights to the home or gets possession of the home is actually determined by the sale agreement here in Oregon, at least. So that is something that we're talking about a typical transaction that could be negotiated before you guys even get under contract. You as the buyer and the seller could negotiate together.
Heck, you could even be in the home before closing, the right to occupy before closing.
Yes.
You know, this is all metaphorical here, but yes, traditionally speaking, in a real estate transaction, it's written in the offer, but usually it's 5 p.m. the date the home funds. Just remember that. 5 p.m. the date the home funds.
Yes, because sometimes the seller needs extra time to get out. There are situations where that happens. So thank you for hanging out with us today. That concludes today's real estate conversation. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell, whether you are a potential home buyer, home seller, homeowner, or you are a fellow realtor or somebody who is in the real estate industry yourselves. We love coming on here and just chatting all things real estate every single week, and we'll see you next time.